to launch.
So I have how long for the presentation again?
Yeah. Sorry, I don't have the I am, and I lose part of the audio. Can you repeat, please?
So if you can just remind me or give me a timing so I can keep track of how long I have for the session, at what time I should finish my presentation.
Yeah, we have maybe 45 minutes, and I'm gonna send you a message. If you finish after, there is no problem. We have some questions, so feel free.
Okay. All right, and let me know when to begin, because now that I'm sharing my screen, I cannot see the
Okay.
Zoom interface.
In just a minute, I start the transmission on Facebook, and after I have to let the people in the room.
Okay, well, just let me know, and
We are online now. Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Alfredo Dominguez, and I'm your co-host. It's a pleasure to me to present Scott Chapova. Sorry if I pronounce your name wrong, please. This day is the lecture is professionalism evaluation practice to make the ethical, inclusive, cross-cutting, transformative, and generating public value. Now, let me introduce Scott. Scott Chaplowy is committed professional with over 24 years experience working with organizations seeking sustainable solutions for social and environmental challenges. He has worked in over 20 countries in Asia, Africa, Europe, and the Americas, engaging with a range of stakeholders from CEOs to refugees. His specialization includes evaluation, strategy, and organizational capacity development, and previous jobs included Director of Evidence, Measurement, and Evaluation for Climate Change at Children Investment Fund Foundation, and Senior of Monitoring and Evaluation Advisory with the International Federal of Red Cross and Red Crescent Society, IFRC. Scott has academic training in geography with a focus on cultural and political ecology, informs his focus on complex system analysis and adaptive evaluation. He has authored publication on engaged in forums and the intersection of the evaluation, sustainable development, and transformation. Scott currently serves as the coordinator for the Transformational Evaluation Working Group and the recently established International Evaluation Academy. He also served as the American Evaluation Association International Working Group as the representative to EVAL SDGs, and is active several other international evaluation forums, including EVAL Partners and the Active Learning Network for Accountability and Performance, ALNAP, the Climate Investment Funds, Transformational Change Learning Partnership, TCLP, and Blue Marble Evaluation. Scott, thank you to be today with us, and please, the floor is yours.
well, thank you very much. It's an honor and a privilege actually to be here today, and I'd like to thank the IOCE for this opportunity to be a keynote speaker. I don't say that lightly. I mean, why is it an honor? In actuality, it's because of VOPEs that they're responsible for the start of my evaluation career. I attended my first VOPE conference back in 2002 with the American Evaluation Association. At the time, I just finished my graduate degree at UCLA in Southern California in geography, and I was consulting with the United Nations. And this was, back in 2002, before the term VOPE was coined as an evaluation for professional evaluations. And in fact, I attended during that 2002 conference, I attended a professional development workshop offered by the prior keynote speaker, Michael Bamberger, who delivered it with Jim Rue on real world evaluation. And since then, the VOPEs in the United States, in Africa, Asia, and now that I'm in Europe as well, has played a critical role in my evaluation career path. So I really mean it when I say it's a privilege to be here, virtually supporting VOPEs to strengthen their institutional capacity for the 21st century. So I want to thank you all for what you do in your work with VOPEs for the evaluation community. This slide summarizes what I'd like to cover with you today in my talk. You might have noted that the title of my presentation differs from what was in the program. The program listed professionalizing evaluation practice to make it more ethical, inclusive, cross-cutting, transformational, and generating public value. And my title, Evaluating Outside the Box, Transforming Evaluation for the Transformational Imperative at the top. That's the title of the presentation I'm going to be giving you, but I think my focus will be on, will touch many of those topics. And it's really what I'll be focusing on is what I believe is of utmost importance to the evaluation community today. And that's supporting the transformational imperative of our times. And this is something that I've devoted much of my recent research and practice in the last few years that I will be sharing with you. And just going back, this is, I'm not going to read every slide, but these are the points that I'd like to cover with you. What is meant by transformational change and why it's important to VOPEs, and what are the key drivers? Why is this transformational stuff on the agenda today? And what are the key barriers that box in evaluation's transformational potential? Because as I will talk about, that's really addressing those barriers are where evaluation can make a difference in the world today. And then I'll briefly conclude on looking evaluating outside of that box. So let me start off first. What is transformational change? Transformational change is often contrasted with incremental change or reform. And by incremental change, that's change to steer the dominant system or the system that's in place right now. Reform improve the dominant system. And in contrast to that incremental change or reform, transformational change is change beyond the dominant system. In other words, transformational change is a radical, deep, and complete change in a system's form, function, and or process. As Michael Quinn-Patton says, transformational change is total. It's multifaceted, multidimensional, multisectional, sectoral, multinational, and multiplicative. It's changes in the way we think, so paradigm shifts, the way we live, the way we relate to each other, and the way we relate to the environment. One of the things I like to point out when I'm talking about transformational change is that it can be positive or negative. A positive example of transformational change is the women's suffrage movement, giving women the right to vote. A negative example of transformational change is the rise of Hitler in Germany during the Great Depression, which had obviously a transformational change, not just in Germany, but globally. Transformational change can be, the other thing I like to point out is it can be top down or bottom up. And if you're familiar with the global principle, which is discussed in Blue Marble evaluation, it underscores this. An example of top-down transformational change that I like to give is the landmark Montreal Protocol. Now, I was born in the 60s, so I remember growing up and learning about, as a teenager, the growing ozone hole that was observed in the 1970s, which had harmful levels of ultraviolet radiation coming through this hole. And it was created by man-made ozone depleting substances that were being put out in the atmosphere. And it was a huge threat to the world. And in response, the Montreal Protocol, which was agreed upon in 1987 and implemented in 1989, regulated the production and consumption of these man-made ozone depleting substances called ODS. Now, the reason I give this as an example of as a transformational change coming from the top that's positive, it's the only UN treaty ratified by every country on earth, all 197 UN member states at the time, and it's gone beyond policy into action and change, and it helped to phase out 98% of the ozone depleting substances to reduce the size of the ozone hole to the smallest on record just a couple of years ago. Now, with climate change, that hole's getting a little bit bigger, but the example of the Montreal Protocol shows how a negative ecological transformational change, the growing ozone hole, contributed to a positive social transformational change, which was the protocol itself. That's a top-down example where a global initiative or policy agreement actually had that type of positive change. An example of bottom-up, and which is often cited when you talk about transformational change, is the anti-apartheid movement in South Africa, where local civil action triggered international movement opposing the South African apartheid system. So I want to just, yes, transformational change is indeed another buzzword in the development industry. But I like to point out it's a buzzword for good reason. Transformation captures the global recognition that we need widespread radical change if we're going to be around as a species in the next century, or at least around as a species in a relatively comfortable, humane manner. I worked for over a decade of my professional evaluation career with the International Red Cross Red Crescent. And their mission is primarily supporting the most vulnerable or helping to respond to humanitarian emergencies and crises. And today we face a global crisis on multiple fronts. For example, last year in the lead up to the COP26 climate summit in Glasgow, more than 200 health journals worldwide published a statement calling on world leaders to take emergency action on climate change and to protect our health. And I'll elaborate this in the next slide, but for now, I just want to clarify that I use transformational evaluation to refer not to a specific evaluation method, like realist evaluation or empowerment evaluation, but instead to refer to evaluation in whatever form it might come that seeks to support positive transformational change. So what I'd like to do now is talk about three primary drivers for the uptake of the transformational agenda in evaluation. And I'll get to how this relates to VOPEs, but because of that uptake of transformational imperative in evaluation, the evaluation societies and associations of the world today, I believe it's very important for them. So basically, funders are increasingly calling for and requiring evidence of transformations. And this is what has fueled or driven the demand for evaluation to hop on board and be able to assess interventions that are seeking transformational change. And I identify three primary drivers. The first driver is the urgency of our times. The science points to a near-term collapse scenario in society if global warming continues under a business as usual scenario. And humanity's really reached a critical juncture. Really the most important, many argue, like myself, in the relatively short existence of our species on this planet. Now, I don't want to doom and gloom you. We're bombarded daily with this in the news. And this age is being referred to as the Anthropocene, which is a period when humanity, which is defined as a period where human activity is the dominant change maker on the planet. But we have, accelerating destruction of our natural ecosystem that we depend on for our survival, overconsumption and massive inequalities and poverty and health crisis, like the COVID pandemic, which we've been wrestling with, the growing geopolitical tensions as power and resources shift. We don't need to look far right now in Europe to see an example of that. And, my last full-time job was as a director of evaluation supporting climate change portfolio at the Children's Investment Fund Foundation. And one of the things that's clear, some people think, oh, you're working on climate change, it's just environmental stuff. It's so interconnected with our social condition. The climate crisis is a meta driver of problematic change with a multiplier effect, exacerbating existing problems such as inequality, poverty, oppression, racism, and other forms of social injustice. Because the deteriorating ecosystem affects the planet's natural resources for water, food, habitation that we need to sustain people, to sustain humanity. And when this stresses the social systems, what usually happens is the poor and the most marginalized and vulnerable bear a disproportionate burden. You might be familiar with the doomsday clock, a symbol created in 1947 in response to the basically to nuclear arms race, looking at humankind's proximity to global catastrophe. It's managed by the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists, and they've moved the minute hand 100 seconds to midnight for the first time in history, warning that humanity is the closest it's ever been to total annihilation. And this is backed by 13 Nobel laureates. So I know I'm banging the doom and gloom drum here. Just yesterday, for example, I read an article in the Huffington Post about the UN warning that if trends continue, the world will go from around 400 disasters per year in 2015 to about 560 per year. So it's going to be increasing, and all around the world, we've been seeing the effects of this from fires throughout Europe, the United States, Australia. It's quite prevalent. It's hard not to see it all around us. The quote on here from Tanya Steele I think captures a lot of what we're looking at today in the world. So one of the most, the second, well, what I just wanted to show here is that one of the most notable indicators of the uptake of transformational agenda in the field of evaluation is the Prague Declaration of Evaluation from AVOPE, IDEAS, in 2019. And it calls out the existential threats that I was just talking about, of the climate crisis, mass extinction of species, growing local and global inequality, and such. And I've got up there two freely available publications that have been published by IDEAS on this topic. At one point, I counted how many authors have contributed to these edited volumes, and it's something like 60 authors. So there's quite a lot of attention of this in the field of evaluation. But anyhow, the second driver that I want to talk about, and particularly being a political economic realist, is the evaluation marketplace, where evaluators make their money. And evaluation, for better or worse, is embedded in the political economy in which it operates, and it follows market trends. And this is exemplified by the UN's 2030 Global Agenda, which is adopted in 2015. And as you can see, transforming is in its title. It's the 15-year plan or roadmap. And it's what identifies the 17 SDGs, the largest and most, it's really the largest and most ambitious global framework ever. And transformation is underscored in its title. Now, the development industry has coalesced around this concept of transformation. And it's been accompanied by articles, books, blogs, conferences, university courses, trainings, keynote talks like the one I'm giving now. And it's also been accompanied by an increasing demand for evaluation to assess interventions that are seeking to have transformational change. So this is an important driver. Now, I don't know if I can see people's hands, but maybe you can raise your hand if you're familiar with the SDGs. I think I might be able to see it up there. Let me see. But it's quite an important framework internationally today. The third driver for transformational agenda and evaluation is the uptake of complexity and systems thinking, which stress the interdependencies, that systems are more than just the sum of their parts. Oops, sorry. I'm getting a message here. Let me see. Here we go. And on the left, you can see from the World Economic Forum, a complexity diagram showing the global challenges that we face today. And on the right, a map or visual diagram of the SDGs showing their interconnections. And the SDGs, to a large extent, mirror they're the solutions that mirror the global problems or challenges that we are confronting today. Now, in evaluation, I contend that the uptake of complexity theory and systems thinking is itself the start of a powerful transformation or paradigm shift in our field, just as it has been in the development industry overall. And that's reflected by some of these publications that you can see before you right now. Now, coming back to why is all this important, this transformational stuff important for VOPEs? Well, setting the marketplace reasons aside, the urgent challenges we confront today threatens our very existence. and as I said, whether we will be around as a species in the coming century, if you believe the science. Now, this includes the existence of professional associations, such as VOPIs. These are a couple of publications right here that are out there. And if you take a look at them, and they're basically saying that, look, the climate change and some of the radical changes that we're having in society right now can even affect the ability of professional associations themselves to function business as usual. And when I take a look at the common denominator across the principles of bylaws that VOPIs have, one of them is the common good. VOPIs underscore the importance of evaluation to contribute to the common good. For example, the AEA states evaluators strive to contribute to the common good and advancement of an equitable and just society. So why I think this is important for VOPIs, this transformational imperative, is how can evaluation, a profession, which is really in the business of assessment, advising, informing, and hastening positive change, how can it speed up transformational change? Evaluation is a field that straddles both theory and practice. So it's really uniquely positioned to support transformational learning and change. And therefore, as organizations that support the evaluation profession, VOPIs are uniquely positioned to support the transformational imperative of our times, and what I think is really the real challenge of our times. So that's one of the reasons I am keen to present out on this. Now, I guess there will be opportunity to answer questions later on, so I will just keep on going here. But what I'd like to do now is take a look at how evaluation can better support versus retard the transformational agenda. And as this quote reflects from Michael Pimpatton, there are many in the field that believe evaluation needs to transform itself if it's to transform or help transform society. In fact, some believe that evaluation is contributing to handicapping the transformational change that we need today. Hence, the title of my presentation is Evaluating Outside of the Box, Breaking Out of the Box, so evaluation can better support the transformational agenda. And I identify four key potholes or bad habits or boxes that hinder the potential of evaluation to contribute to the transformational agenda. And I've written about this, for example, in the Social Innovations Journal article cited here, which you can actually access for free. It's an open access journal. And I don't want to, as I introduce you to these boxes, I don't want to get too much into the theoretical jargon or methodological explanation of this. But I do believe these four boxes or pitfalls are important to look at, because when you look at the problem in a field like evaluation, I believe that it carries the kernel of the solution, pointing towards what must be recognized and overcome so evaluation can make a better contribution for society. So that's going to be the focus of the remainder of my talk. And the first box that I want to talk about is the project or program box. And historically, evaluation has largely reinforced a project mentality dominated by a single, clearly defined projects or programs provided by single agencies and funded by single donors. Now, typically these interventions are treated as closed systems, hence box, designed with a narrow scope, a logic model or theory of change of how it's going to achieve its intended results or changes, that often excludes the broader context in which they are delivered. And project models, the problem with this kind of linear versus conceptual model approach is that the project models are just that. They're models, they're not reality. And theories of change are just that. They're theories, they're not reality. And reality and transformation does not behave according to predetermined project result chains or predetermined changes, outcomes, objectives, and such. Transformation, like reality, is emergent. It's very unpredictable, and it happens in open systems that transcend time, place, political borders, predetermined theories of change, and projects. So the project mentality typically fosters a kind of reductionist planning and analysis approach that reinforces this siloed mentality often, rather than more systems thinking, which I'll talk about shortly. The diagram up here illustrates that. On the left is kind of that more linear approach, and on the right is the reality that we confront. So the results chain that forms the backbone of many logic models, theories of change, or other design frameworks is a hallmark or a good example of that project fixation. And it reflects a preoccupation on intended or predetermined results. Let me give you an example here. You have your inputs that contribute to activities, which lead to outputs, which lead to intended outcomes, and then your intended impact. Okay, but in reality, there's a lot of stuff, a lot of factors and actors that can affect or influence that plan, particularly on a project that's 1, 2, 3, 4 years long. And there can be a lot of unintended positive consequences or negative consequences. Okay, and what needs to happen is we need to try to break out of this mentality, and that's why there's been a lot of attention, which I'll talk about shortly, about with the uptake or attention on complexity and systems thinking in evaluation. The second box that I like to identify is what I call the quantitative box. And these are two quotes that I like. One from Jerry Mueller, who's a professor, and this book is The Tyranny of Metrics, is on Princeton University Press. And Andrew Natisos worked with USAID and several international organizations as a senior administrator, and he refers to the metrics fixation, or the quantitative box, is the obsessive measurement disorder, OMD. And it occurs when the production of evidence-based data undermines the very interventions they're supposed to support. And this is going to relate to another box I'll identify, because if you recall back here, I had got 4 boxes that we'll be talking about. And anyhow, it occurs, as I mentioned, when there's an overfixation on quantitative data to uphold accountability. And it often ends up ducking where leadership or decision makers duck out of the responsibility to make decisions when uncertainty exists, and they try to rely on numbers. And this is problematic. You often might have heard often gets asserted, what gets measured gets done, okay? But another witticism reminds us that not everything that can be counted counts, and not everything that counts can be counted. And basically, reality is not a binary concept that can be counted, nor can it be wrapped up in neat quantitative boxes with key performance indicators, KPIs. So the same attributes that make systems complex make interventions within them hard to measure. It doesn't mean we throw the baby out with the bathwater and we don't try to gather and measure and use quantitative data, which is very important to measure our interventions, but we need to realize the limitations of that and not blindly fall into the trap or the bad habit of putting that quantitative cart before the horse. The third temporal box is the third box that I identified is the temporal box, and projects are typically designed with a given timeline, typically dictated by donor funding cycles. And it reflects, again, this mechanistic causal model that kind of evokes some static, predictable order, timing, and change. But again, complexity of reality does not behave according to the project timeframes and budget and reporting cycles. For example, consider how the following unpredictable events have impacted the timing and budgets of programs and projects. COVID, the 2008 Great Recession, the election of Donald Trump, Putin's warpath. These are all examples of significant transformational changes in the context that programs and projects are implemented that affect the budgets and timeframes and such. The conventional evaluation project cycle or program cycle is you've got your initial assessment, which contributes to planning, which contributes to implementation and monitoring, and then you evaluate, and ideally you reflect and learn throughout. So, and it leads to a baseline, midterm, or real-time evaluation, and final or impact evaluation recipe. Now, what I'm looking at is I'm more interested in monitoring as evaluation, where we need to implement more iteratively, where ongoing monitoring as evaluation supports course correction, and it encourages evaluative thinking. So it's not just eventful during a baseline, midline, and final evaluation, but you weave it iteratively throughout the evaluation cycle. And this diagram kind of illustrates that, where you've got this iterative analysis that and strategy testing that happens. So you have an initial design, which was shown here. You do a baseline, you design the strategy, and then you implement in as monitoring as evaluation, and then you review and evaluate, and then you iteratively revisit that and you test your strategy. Okay, and this is just an example of a way to of a lot of what I see happening in the evaluation industry to address this kind of temporal trap that often comes along and accompanies the project trap. And then the last box that I want to discuss, I think, really underpins and fuels the other boxes. And basically that's the accountability trap. And as the quote says, you know, the political economy of evaluation can, you know, basically consign evaluation to, it just becomes a descriptive tick box accountability hoop that people implementing programs and projects feel they need to jump through to get their funding. And there's an increasing call for evaluation that supports accountability to the plan and not just the projects and whether their intended results are making a difference. It's very paradoxical that the most cited definition, I would contend, in evaluation is from Michael Scriven, which is to determine the merit, worth, and value or significance of what's being evaluated, an intervention. And evaluation is being criticized by many for having become an exercise that supports accountability to donors and whether the planned results are achieved rather than whether they've made a difference, positive or negative. And evaluation doesn't always adequately look beyond the planned results of a project or program to determine its impact on the larger human and natural ecosystem. This is something that Ernst Haus has written quite a bit about, as well as Thomas Schwant, and Michael Scriven refers to it as evaluphobia. So, I am basically, I feel I am speaking to what a lot of evaluation thought leaders have already identified. And so that's the fourth box that I want to introduce, and I can talk about this more during the Q&A and give some examples of how it plays out. But anyhow, I'm looking at my clock here. I'm getting towards my time, and I imagine you've all been bombarded with a lot of talking heads like me. So I want to wrap up with this quote from Bob Picciotti, who was the Director General of the Independent Evaluation Group with the World Bank, as the quote shows there, for quite some time. And for me, it's impressionable to read such a quote from a person who's worked at the level of evaluation as Bob. And I think it underscores the pivotal and exciting time it is for evaluation. And this is why I wanted to flag this and put it on the radar for the leadership of VOPEs today. I hope it will instill a little, will instill a little bit of transformational learning for you all. And maybe VOPEs can help evaluation surf what he calls the transformational wave that is happening today. I've got recommended resources that I've put together, and I wanted to end with that slide because I think it relates to evaluating beyond the box. There's a lot of great work that's going on there. I don't know if the resolution of this slide shows you, but there is quite a few resources out there that reflect the work on this. In evaluation, there's Blue Marble evaluation, footprint evaluation. These are more than just communities of practice. They're websites, they've got resources. Footprint evaluation is based with Better Evaluation. Blue Marble evaluation, of course, with Michael Quinn-Patton. The Center for Evaluation of Complexity of Cross and Nexus is a real valuable resource. The Transformational Change Learning Partnership from the Climate Investment Fund. And then there's, this is just a few of some of the publications that are out there today on this topic. I truly agree with Bob's quote beforehand that it's really a new wave that we're looking at right now. And I think it should be on the radar for VOPEs. So I'm seeing 7:45 on my clock here. I'm looking, so I think I should be probably wrapping up. I just want to say that one of the things that was in the initial title for this, and then I wanted to leak with my presentation, is inclusivity, because I think it's so important today. Inclusivity is another constant that's coming up because if we're going to address these challenges that we have today in evaluation, we need to listen to different approaches that go outside our normal boxes in ways of looking at this. And that includes indigenous knowledge systems. It includes the efforts to decolonize evaluation. It includes a lot of sources, feminist evaluation, that are out there today. And so I just wanted to end on that note. I tried to look for a way to convey that in the slide showing hands working together of different colors. But in short, I will end with that. I think that is my last slide, and turn it back to the facilitator. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. Was amazing to see your presentation, and I think there are no more questions. No, just congratulations for your presentation. Well, there is no more for me to give the thanks for participating with us, and it was really a pleasure. And I don't know, Janet, if there is some question from the audience. No? More congrats. Janet, we can hear you.
Okay, well, good.
Hi. Yes, thank you, Scott. Thank you very much about for this presentation. The book published by Ideas, it's a wonderful material. I've enjoyed it very, very much. And I have several questions and reflections all the time, because you really need to read the book once and again, because it is a very big compilation, a big material. So, well, we have in this program, in the BOPE Leadership Bootcamp, we have BOPE representatives. And when you started your presentation, you said you started with BOPEs. And
Yes.
we are doing some strengthening with the BOPEs. But not only about the organizational strengthening, but also in technical topics on evaluation. So in this closing event, we wanted that people had new perspectives, a wide context about the evaluation ecosystem, because people is working in their own BOPEs, national BOPEs, a small perspective, a close perspective, and we think that an evaluator needs a very wide perspective about many topics. Talking with you about the transformative evaluation, with one hour ago with Michael Bamberger about process evaluation, it's helping us to get more ideas, more information, to strong our position as evaluators. So I want to thank you, and I know our BOPEs has many questions, but I have been reading some other chats, and they said, hearing people who has big ideas is very, very important. And when we go back to our evaluations and we said, wow, what do we do now? Because it's very difficult sometimes to bring to the practice for the practitioners all these ideas. What can you recommend us for the people who are not very deep in these topics? What could we do to start to practicing all these knowledges? that we are knowing in all these conferences.
Right. Well, a couple things. I mean, one of the things I would say the presentation that I just gave was geared towards people who don't even need to be evaluators. And that's, I think it's important to demystify some of this and not make it overly, sometimes it's easy to dive into the complexities of different methods. And I think it's important to pull back and try to give a hook to reel people in. And I felt for the VOPI leadership, I know some of the VOPI leadership that I've worked with, they're not all necessarily hardcore evaluators. What they are good at is leading professional associations. So I wanted people to understand that. The resource list, and I see Ian Hopewell, I can't read the whole last name there, says they like the resource list. Please, if you want, you can send me an email, and I'll put my email in chat, and I can send you that resource list. And it's all in, there we go. It's all in, all hyperlinked, all open access resources. But I think one of the key solutions is I'm a critic of evaluation in the sense that I think there's a lot of navel gazing that happens in the field. And we need to, and this is not original to me, a lot of evaluation thought leaders say this, and I would get in a rabbit hole if I mention one because I feel I need to mention all the others. But a lot of them are saying we need to adopt a transdisciplinary approach. We need to look outside just of our field. So one of the ways to do that is when we're involved in forums, whether it's an online community of practice or an initiative or such, try to have people who aren't just evaluators involved with it, but have a more inclusive approach, not just people from the north and south who are evaluators, but people who might not even be evaluators themselves, coming from other fields. Because when you look at evaluative thinking, a lot of people do evaluative thinking and they don't call themselves evaluators. A lot of epidemiologists, for example, use a lot of our skill sets, but they don't necessarily call themselves evaluators. When I worked in climate change as well, a lot of people looking at climate mitigation, likewise, have those tools that they bring with them. So that's one thing that I think is really important. Another thing I think that is critically important is evaluation needs to catch up with data science. And I haven't spoken much on this because I imagine Michael Bamberger has already touched on that because he's really been a strong advocate. In fact, I edited a learning brief he wrote for eval SDGs on big data and its application in evaluation. And of course, he recently published with the Rockefeller Foundation a brilliant, freely accessible book online with York, Y-O-R-K, looking at data science and how it can be used in evaluation. So I really think data science is another important part of it. And then I think, circling back to this inclusive, I call it a principle, just going beyond the walk and the talk and doing the walk. And that also includes, really for me, includes young and emerging evaluators. And that's something I've really tried to champion in my work. It's their future. And it's critically important, I think, to engage them and give them a voice in high profile dialogues. And I'm very encouraged. For example, I've been recently engaged. I've been involved a lot with the International Evaluation Academy, which is a new initiative. And on its board, it was nice to see that there are some young and emerging evaluators on the board who have that space to contribute their voice. there was a piece in here I just wanted to respond to. Somebody asking if the IFRC M&E guide is still a good practical starter. Thank you for flagging that in. It was identified as a top 5 M&E guide by an independent source. And I was really flattered because I developed that. I think it's a good starting place, but to be honest with you, it's based in the results-based management, kind of more linear approach to evaluation. And where I think we need to go is further than that now. That was published in 2011. And and the world, I would say, had just as many problems back then, but we've evolved in our thinking. So I think it's a good place to start. It's got amazing tools in the annex, but I think we have to start thinking more about not just logic models or results-based frameworks, but theories of change and going beyond theories of change to theories of transformation, which link different conceptual approaches that are in projects, different theories of change or result frameworks together to have a larger picture of what we're working on. So that is, yes. So and one of the things that I published with Brad Cousins is a book, monitoring and evaluation training, which looks at capacity building for evaluation. And I see that's coming from Ian as well. Yeah, I think that's very relevant. It looks at how to build, it's often called ECB, Evaluation Capacity Building, or ECD, Evaluation Capacity Development. That's critically important. But we need to be looking at innovative ways to build people's capacity. And oftentimes that involves peer-to-peer learning, where we empower the very people that we want to build their capacity to do so with each other. And that's what I see is really fertile ground right now for evaluation capacity development, is kind of a horizontal approach that in a way decolonizes evaluation capacity development. So it's not so much top down, but it's more horizontal.
Scott, so many, thank you. The time is over. You have a lot of fans and there are so many people asking for your books. We're gonna send an email with the question we have got at the mails, but there is no more to say thank you, and I hope to see you soon.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
See you.
And thank all the VOPI leaders for the hard work that they do.